Welcome everyone. I'm Kelly McFarland, your facilitator for today's webinar. This Bidders Conference is organized by Swords to Plowshares and is designed to provide information regarding the California Veterans Employment and Training Collaborative. Swords to Plowshares is administering a competitive re-grant program for California nonprofit organizations to provide employment and job training services for veterans. The goals of the California Veterans Employment and Training Collaborative in its second year are to help veterans recently separated from the military prepare for and find new careers in California and to increase veterans' overall health, economic stability, and ability to successfully transition to civilian life. The first portion of the webinar will provide an overview of grant goals, program activities, and qualifying trainings, criteria for reviewing proposals, and eligibility. The second portion will be a Q&A session with the presenters where you will have an opportunity to ask specific questions about the grant. Our presenters today are Amy Fairweather, who has directed Swords to Plowshares Institute for Veteran Policy, known as IVP, since its inception in 2005. IVP conducts policy advocacy and community education at the local, state, and federal levels. Amy has directed the Swords to Plowshares re-grant program, now in its second year. Megan Zottarelli is an analyst at the Institute for Veteran Policy at Swords to Plowshares and manages the re-grant program. Megan designed the request for proposal process and will be the contact for proposal inquiries. During our Q&A session, we should also be joined by Dave Lopez, Deputy Director for Programs and Operations. Dave joined Swords to Plowshares in 2006 and has significantly expanded the organization's vocational training programs by establishing strong partnerships and collaborations with employers and educational vocational providers. During this webinar, you may type questions to the presenters, Swords to Plowshares staff, or even another participant at any time. Simply type your questions in the questions box on the right side of your webinar's display. After the presentation, we will review the questions and comments posted. And during this Q&A session, if you have microphone capability, you may also ask a question of the presenters by raising your virtual hand. Simply click on the small hand icon next to your name in the list of attendees. Kevin Miller, Swords to Plowshares staff, will also be online during the webinar to provide technical assistance during the presentation. Please note this webinar is being recorded. And now, please welcome Amy Fairweather and Megan Zottarelli. Amy, we're having some difficulty hearing you. Amy, we're having difficulty hearing you. Is it possible for Megan to take over? Everybody, please excuse our technical difficulties. We'll be back online shortly.
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now?
Hi, Amy. That sounds fabulous. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry everybody for that.
No problem at all. Would it be possible to start over again with the beginning of the slides?
Yes. So the cover
Awesome.
slide is already passed, but that's okay. I think we sort of covered that. I think you all know that, what the purpose of today is. So we're on to the next slide. The goals of this grant are to help veterans prepare for, obtain, and retain gainful employment, and to increase their overall health, economic stability, and transition to civilian life, and also to promote collaboration among veteran services in California. The focus is targeted towards post-9/11 veterans, but it's not exclusively for those veterans. We recognize that we're all sort of struggling with tailoring our services in order to be relevant and accessible to new veterans, and to work on our programs so that they're more successful with this cohort that's relatively new to us all. So what we're looking at is, with these new veterans, when we look at our sort of, our cohort that we've been working with over these many years, we're looking at an older veteran, someone who might have been homeless, who might have big gaps in their employment record. In these cases, with the newer veterans, we're looking at someone who's at the beginning of their career, who might need a job yesterday, but where there's an opportunity to look at career advancement opportunities, and both satisfy the need for a job yesterday, but also look at training that would give those veterans an opportunity for some higher paying jobs with opportunities for advancement. Speaking of advancement, let's advance the slide. Okay, so the main program activities are the job training services and placement, integrated supportive services. These are, if your organization has in-house supportive services, that you would be triaging your veterans through those services as needed, or if you work in a community where you don't have those services at your agency, that you have a connection to the community of care, to the continuum of care in your community, and are able to meet some of the other needs. We know that when veterans come to us looking for help getting a job, they usually, have other issues going on. They don't have just the joblessness in a vacuum. The other thing I want to add about the program activities is that we want to create this collaborative community in California where we're working in our respective locations throughout the state. We might be working with different populations of veterans, different industries based on our locality, but we do have a lot in common, and we will be throughout the program, throughout the year, engaging in webinars and technical assistance for all of the grantees and for one another, sharing information with one another about successful new programs. So the areas where we will have technical assistance are in outreach. If we're talking about the new generation or women veterans, we have to sort of challenge ourselves to go outside the box and be accessible and visible to a new generation of veterans. Different tactics like job brokering, job training programs, whether they be cohort models or one-offs in the community. We'll be providing Combat to Community, which is our cultural competency training. We know many of you work with veterans and are very, very familiar with veterans, but we're always working to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information regarding other resources that are available through the VA and the community, and we know that that those change depending on the winds of Congress and our local communities. Other areas where we want to support one another is in organizational development and sustainability. So now if we go on to the next, the definitions of job training for the purpose of this grant. We want to give you maximum flexibility. However, some of, in fact, 20% of the awards must be spent on some sort of training. That does not mean that it is, equally divided among your enrollees, but 20% of your total grant must be spent on training activities. So we have the existing classroom training, which I think we're all pretty familiar with. This, of course, gives you maximum flexibility with regard to individual veterans and what their skills and interests are. And in that case, you identify what their interests are, what their skill base is, identify a training program with a short-term certification program in your community, and simply pay the tuition and costs. And of course, also, it is perfectly fine to use these funds for any costs associated with equipment or uniforms or transportation or other things that make it possible for this individual veteran to successfully complete the training and get a job. So the next example is the broker trainings. This is something that we've done at SWORDS, and I know that some of our partners in California have done it as well. And this is a case where you develop a program for training. Usually it's best to contact the potential employers on the front end of this to make sure that they need people in these areas, that the training curriculum will be recognized by that employer as valuable. And if it isn't, that they could contribute to that curriculum so that the people coming out of that class would be valuable employees to them. We know that it's difficult to get employers to train up on their dime, so this is a way that they can help us train up on our dime, as it were. The other really, that we've found is a real benefit to this model is that, we find a cohort of veterans who are going to take the class together at a community college or a vocational institute, and we found that creates a community within the classroom that can be very supportive in terms of those veterans working together and helping each other with other needs, and just being in an environment that's comfortable for them. And if we go on to the next, the other example we have is an industry designed and delivered training. So working with industries in your locality where the industry performs the training. Again, if you can get an industry who wants to train up with on-the-job training, that's spectacular. Often they are not willing to pay for that. So this is a way that we can use our efforts and funds to make this sort of thing possible. So for example, we did a training with PG&E. We identified, we put ads out on Craigslist and the internet and social media looking for, we didn't tell in the ads what organization we were working with because we didn't want the veterans to go straight to them, nor did PG&E want the veterans to go straight to them. We went through those candidates, reviewed them, screened them, chose the ones who would be the most benefit by the training and the most likely to be picked up for a job with PG&E. Then PG&E actually taught the training at a local school. The other thing we did around that was we knew that every single one of those students were not going to be hired by that particular utility, so we did a lot of outreach to other utilities in the area so that those, if there were 20 students, for example, and 15 were hired, that we had some leads for those other 5 with other utilities. Okay, so now we're going through the criteria for review and approval of proposals. This is pretty straightforward. Cultural understanding of veteran employment and training needs. I want to say that the organizations do not have to be providing services exclusively for veterans, but they have to be able to demonstrate that they have either existing programs for veterans or they have a way to ramp one up and have some understanding of this cohort. Project activities and goals clearly defined. That's always good, and a proven ability to achieve these goals. Priority considerations, innovative and creative projects. Our master grantor, which is Walmart Foundation, is very interested in increasing the enrollment and placement of younger veterans and to some degree women veterans, and to adding on to the success of veteran employment programs in California as they exist, adding some new and creative approaches, particularly that would be relevant and meaningful for younger people at the beginnings of their careers. So the target population is post 9/11 and recently separated veterans, but again, this does not have to be exclusively for them. We know that it's difficult sometimes to get all of your numbers related to that age group. Of course, need and the effectiveness and the impact of your proposed program. Okay, the next slide. Some of this is a little bit repetitive, but demonstrate that your program has previously achieved successful outcomes. Research that validates the methodology of proposed grant. Organizations must demonstrate ability to develop or expand veteran-specific job training services within your organization. So, we are looking for a little bit more than business as usual, I guess. But we also want to really work with you throughout this time to identify successful new practices and share them with one another as we all tailor our programs to be more relevant as times change. The organizations may apply for grants in the $30,000 to $70,000 grants. On the following page, we have a grid that actually shows the performance requirements for those. It should be fairly straightforward here. So, for example, the first column, if you ask for $30,000, that means you are going to engage 60 veterans as potential participants. You will enroll 45 veterans in employment training services. You will enroll 80% of those enrollees in a job training activity with a training completion rate of 80%. You will place 70% of participants in employment with a 65% retention rate for 90 days and 60% at least 180 days. And so on and so forth as you go up the ramp with more funds and therefore more deliverables. And now I'm going to turn it over to Megan to go over some of the more the nuts and bolts of the actual application process. So here's Megan Zottarelli.
Hello, everyone. I apologize for the technical difficulties that we're having. As Amy said, I'm going to walk you through some of the nuts and bolts. I'll also be the contact person for the RFP process, so if at any time during your preparation of the proposal, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email address will be listed at the end of the webinar and is also listed in the RFP. So applicants must be registered 501c3 nonprofit organizations operating in California. As Amy said, they must have current employment service programs. They don't have to be veteran specific, and they don't need to currently operate job training programs, but they must demonstrate the capacity to develop job training services specifically for veterans. Moving on. And they also must have current workforce development funding streams. And funding from Swords to Plowshares should be used to leverage this funding to achieve the outcomes of the project. So we anticipate grantees to have a proven record of serving targeted communities with workforce development funding and to use this funding together with the funding from Swords to Plowshares to better reach their veteran population. And no fiscal sponsorships are allowed. So you may partner with another 501c3 organization to apply, but you both must be 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So an example of this, of a qualifying partnership, would be if you are a veteran-serving organization and you would like to partner with an employment service organization to provide training to a veteran cohort. In this case, one of you must take the lead in the application, and we may ask for additional documentation from both organizations applying. So we may be in contact with you throughout the selection process. Moving on to budget requirements, as Amy said, a minimum of 20% of the project funds provided by Swords to Plowshares must be used for vocational training. And I should specify that this portion cannot include job readiness training, which is like personal management, leadership, communication, workplace, etiquette. This specifically needs to be reserved for occupational and vocational training. And overhead indirect costs cannot exceed 10% of our portion of the program budget. Moving on to timeline, you have a 6-week window to develop and submit your proposal on or before April 1st. We've already received a couple of proposals, surprisingly. From there, the selection committee will review proposals and announce grant decisions on June 2nd. You will be notified whether or not you have been awarded funding on June 2nd by email. And the grant service period is 12 months, but the reporting period is 18 months, so we can track retention data. This is confusing to some folks, but this means that recipients will begin service delivery on July 1st, 2014, provide services for 12 months. And recipients will be expected to provide narrative progress reports and data on veterans served during the performance period, as well as track and report on job retention up to December 31st, 2015. So that's the 18-month reporting window. So specific reporting dates are listed in the RFP if you have any further questions about that. And moving on to selection process. Once an application is received, it's reviewed by staff to make sure it meets all funding requirements. During the selection process, we will gather an advisory committee consisting of Swords to Plowshares staff, experts on community giving and employment services, and experts on job training services who will review the proposals. So qualified applications will first be reviewed by staff, and then they will be provided to the advisory committee for review. And during this period, we may contact you for further information or clarification regarding your proposal. So while specific selection criteria is not available at this time, you should pay particular attention to the priority considerations that Amy mentioned in this presentation. Don't specifically go by those, but those are some of the criteria that we will be considering. You may also request feedback on your proposal once the award decisions have been made, and you can do that by contacting me. Moving on. So full instructions for submitting proposals are in the request for proposals. We hope it's as comprehensive as possible. And if not, you can feel free to contact me at this email address with any questions or comments you have about the RFP and the proposed project. You can also refer to our frequently asked questions for additional information. We are not accepting phone calls, but I'm happy to respond promptly to your email. And you can email me as much as possible. So at this time, we want to open up questions to the webinar audience. We know that there have been many that have come in, so Kelly will help us field those questions now.
Absolutely, Megan. Thank you so much for the good information. We do have a couple of great questions right off the bat. Let's clear out some of the basic ones. We had a question regarding whether a copy of the slides and the presentation will be available. Yes, we will make the presentation and the recorded webinar available on our website starting probably Monday morning. So that should be available for everybody. One of the next questions had to do, or was from Bob Moorhead. He indicates he's certified in California as a disabled veteran business enterprise, and he wants to know how he can participate in the program. He's helped mentor other veterans in California and the VA to help get them certified and established businesses as a DVBE. indicates he's not a 501(c), but would be open to work in collaboration with a company to provide assistance to help veterans start a business. Any input for him, Megan or Amy?
So for this project, unfortunately, applicants must be registered 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So if he is working under a 501c3 nonprofit in partnership, that 501c3 may apply, but they cannot apply as a fiscal sponsor. So they must be the project lead for this.
Okay.
But there's nothing that would prevent you from working with a local veteran employment group in order to hire veterans at your organization, but the grantees themselves have to be 501c3s.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll answer that. We also had a question regarding Walmart being the only grantor of this initiative. Is that a true statement, that Walmart is the only grantor of this initiative?
This particular re-granting, yes, the master funder is Walmart Foundation for the money that we are distributing, yes.
Okay. We also have a question regarding co-enrollment, and I think we've covered that. I think we're asking about joining forces with another 50 service provider or 501c3.
Unless what you're asking is whether or not the veterans who are enrolled under this program can be simultaneously co-enrolled under your VEEP or your HVRP grants, and the answer to that is yes. They may be co-enrolled with other employment programs and other employment grants within your agency.
Great, because it just clarified, thank you, Shelley, she indicates DOL, VWIP, and EDD VEEP.
Yes, yes, you may co-enroll.
Okay,
and
great.
In fact, I just want to just say a little bit more that, you know, the amount of money that we're talking about with these grants is really, it's not adequate to stand up a standalone employment program. So all of the grantees would have other funding streams, whether it be those or private funding streams, and it's absolutely all right to co-enroll.
Okay, great. Another question regarding a percentage of funding from Walmart. What percentage of the funding is from Walmart, and that would be Walmart Foundation, 100%?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And we also have another question regarding geographic location. We have Hillary Dahl is interested in asking whether a 501(c) can be based in Washington, D.C., but have programs in California.
Yes, as long as you have programs in California. If you're a national organization or if you're located outside of California, that's fine as long as you also operate in California.
Okay. Okay. Let me just make sure that we have answered that one. We just did. How about clarifying fiscal sponsorship? We have a question regarding asking for clarification on the fiscal sponsorship. We do our work under a fiscal sponsor that is a 501c3. They are not one themselves. Is this okay?
So if you are an organization that already has a fiscal sponsor, so routinely you apply for grants for your work through your fiscal sponsor, is that all right? May those people apply for the grant? So for example, Megan, if Joe's employment agency uses Tide Foundation as its fiscal sponsor because they don't have their own 501c3, is that okay? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So, sorry, I guess I should have clarified fiscal sponsorships in the presentation. So So if you're specifically just for this project, looking to have a fiscal sponsor, but not in your everyday operations, do you have a fiscal sponsorship? That won't qualify. Does that make sense?
Yes, you have to have had a track record.
Okay. Another question regarding a pending status of a 501c3. Question from Catherine. Our 501c3 status is pending. Can we still submit proposals? And I think you just kind of hinted that, or kind of answered that, Amy.
No, there has to be existing 501c3 status of some kind.
Okay.
So hopefully they can get it established by April 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have entrepreneurial training question. Does entrepreneurial training count towards the 20% training budget requirement?
Yes, it could, but you would still be required to meet those placement numbers. So I would say, yes, that works so long as you meet the placement numbers. So that individual, but of course that wouldn't necessarily be the same individual.
And also the same thing goes for career advancement opportunities. So if someone is already employed or perhaps underemployed and they would like to advance their career and take vocational training courses in order to do so, you may use training funds for that purpose as well. But as Amy said, you must meet the minimum requirements of numbers served.
Okay, thank you. We have a question regarding the number of organizations that are attending this bidders conference. Do we have a number to share?
We don't have a number of organizations, but we have around 40 attendees for this bidders conference, and we've received a lot of inquiries through email.
Okay, great. And then we have a couple people. It seems like we need to connect them in a business sense. We have Susan is asking what geographic area Bob Moorhead is located in. Some of us could use his skills. So it seems like we might want to connect those two, and we'll be happy to do that.
Great, yes. I can also I can introduce you both if you contact me at that email address.
That's great. That's great, Megan. That was Bob Moorhead and Susan, and forgive me if I mispronounce the last name, Fairy.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have 2 more questions. In fact, a little follow-up question there about is there a way we connect with other participants and bidders instead of interested in partnering? So let me restate that. Is there a way we can connect with other participants and bidders interested in partnering? And I think Megan just answered that by way of she'll be happy to connect people.
Yes, if you want to email me, I can, if you don't mind me sharing your email contact information, then I can distribute. I won't just automatically distribute the email addresses of all the bidders on this webinar, but if you are interested in collaborating with others on this project, then you can contact me at the email address on the screen.
We have a question from Thomas. Is funding contingent on making the placement goals?
Well, we expect people who we fund to make those placement goals. Obviously, we won't know exactly until the end. However, we will be looking at the other material to determine if it is more or less likely that people will be able to hit the performance goals. And if we see very early on in the grant process that that the goals are nowhere near being satisfied, we could stop the grant.
While funding is, it is contingent on the placement goals, we do understand that there are other factors outside of your control, especially when working with targeted communities. And, part of this grant collaborative is sharing information, providing technical assistance. So if during the grant period, if you're having problems with outreach or placement, and you need our help or perhaps the help of another grant recipient in that area, that's what the collaborative is about. But yes, funding is contingent on meeting those placement goals. But hopefully that's a conversation for later that we hopefully won't have to have.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is, why is this called a re-granting program? Do previous grantees have an advantage?
It's only called the re-granting process because we have received a master grant to then distribute, to re-grant, as it were, to all of you. So it has nothing to do with the people who received grants before. It's just that that we are re-granting the money that was granted to us. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does.
And do previous grantees have an advantage?
I would say only to the extent that they meet all the other criteria
and have a proven track
record. But they don't get any. They don't get any additional points as a matter of course.
Okay. So in other words, they have to stand on their own performance, their past performance.
And it should be said that the last funding period, there was a lot of research on our part up front to select recipients, so it was not an open, competitive RFP process. But the goal of this year is to open it up to others in the community of California.
And also I would say that, even if you're a previous grantee and you had difficulty meeting your goals, if you can demonstrate that either you are biting off a smaller chunk of deliverables, so last time you went for 60,000, this time you're going for 30,000, or if you can show that you've got some program in place that is very promising, or a partnership in the community, that I would say that performance on the last one won't necessarily be or a bad, not a bad performance, but a difficult performance on the last one doesn't mean that you can't get a new one either, as long as you have an interesting and promising proposal.
Okay. The next question we have is, when will the funds be released?
So the funds will be released after the grant agreement letters are signed, so at the start of or prior to the grant service period, which is July 1st. As long as the grant agreement letters are signed, then we will get the funds to you prior to the start date.
Thank you, Megan. And Catherine has a question regarding what total grant money is available.
I think it's 520.
It's 500,000.
500,000. Yeah.
500,000. That's also more clearly outlined in the RFP. But it's a total of 500,000 distributed to a minimum of 7 organizations. and you may request between 30 and 70,000.
Okay, so that was 30 between the total grant that we have to re-grant is 500,000, and each grant will be between 30 and 70,000 is the request amount?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And I think we have one, Bob Moore had just indicated that he will coordinate with Megan to connect with organizations interested in the veteran program he's active in. As a disabled veteran business enterprise, there's opportunity for disabled veterans in California, and many of them need to be trained on the certification process and network opportunities for companies who want to engage a DVBE in their business with the state or federal government. So that's good news. Sounds like we're connecting some people. And then we have a question regarding a cost per participant. Is there an estimate of cost per participant?
I mean, if you do the simple math,
I think the cost per placement, I'll have to actually get back to you, but the cost per placement is around $900.
but that said, you don't have to spread your spending equally among enrollees. So if, for example, you're paying $3,000 for a training for veteran A and only $200 on a training that's appropriate for veteran B, that's just fine. And as with other costs that you're using for overhead that go into your cost per placement.
Okay. So I think we have a couple of hands raised in the audience here, and I'd like to try to see if we can unmute Lisa, and forgive me again, Rijwani, to see if we can answer her question. Lisa, are you available to, you have audio capability? Okay, Lisa, if unfortunately we can't hear you right now, so if you could use your question box on the right-hand side of the webinar there to type your question into us, that would be great. We don't want to miss out on answering your question. And then wanted to also make sure that Catherine had also raised her hand, Catherine Kubarski, and I hope that we have answered her questions. I see that she did type some in. And I think we have covered all the questions that have been submitted. Does anybody have any further questions, either by typing or by raising your hand? All right then. I think we have we've covered all the questions, and we pretty much have concluded our Bidders Conference presentation. We want to thank our presenters, Amy Fairweather and Megan Zottarelli, and to you, our participants. If you have any other further questions regarding the grant, please contact Megan at her email address, which is on the screen right now. And please refer to our frequently asked questions document on our website. Again, this webinar and the PowerPoint presentation will be made available for download as early as Monday morning. And reminder, no phone calls, please, but Megan loves the emails. So thank you all again for your time. This concludes our webinar, and you may now disconnect.